This is Fantasy Football Today from CBSSports.com.
We welcome you to a special edition of Fantasy Football Today for CBS Local Sports. Adam Azer, Jamie Eisenberg, and Dave Richard here. It is time to play Stardom and Situm in Fantasy Week 4. We've got matchups at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end that fantasy owners need to pay attention to. Dave, a start at quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. Big Ben out in London. Perfect week for him.
I mean, he's got to do well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because of Big Ben in London, and he did well last week in a comeback. He tried to get the Steelers back into it against Chicago, put up 29 fantasy points, averaged almost 10 yards per pass attempt. That's pretty good for a quarterback. He's going up against the Vikings in London. The Minnesota Vikings have allowed at least 290 passing yards and at least 2 touchdowns to each of the 3 quarterbacks that they've faced so far. I think the Steelers have recognized that they have to lean on Big Ben's arm. They're going to keep doing it, and Big Ben's going to have a solid day.
We are sitting Russell Wilson this week, Jamie.
Yeah, I think you could look at last week's game. It was great. I think if you have Russell Wilson, I don't know if I'd make a move to pick up somebody else because you want to buy into the way that he played against Jacksonville and hope that's a sign of things to come. The thing that I don't like is that the matchup against Houston is much tougher than what he faced in Jacksonville. He is going on the road. The Texans obviously need to win this game coming off that loss last week against Baltimore. You look at the way the Texans have played. Yes, they gave up 4 passing touchdowns to Phillip Rivers in week 1, but they've barely allowed 200 yards passing in each of the last 3 games that they've played. So I think Russell Wilson's going to have to score to be successful. He's not running at the level that we like Russell Wilson to run at. So he's not a top 12 quarterback, but if you have to start him, he's okay.
Right. Running backs, 1 to start, 1 to sit, and Jamie, Bernard Pierce delivered last week. He got into the end zone. He had a good game for fantasy owners. Start him this week?
I'd like to see a little bit better yards per carry, and I
yeah,
think it's
that'd
going
be
to
nice.
happen
That'd be nice
against that Buffalo defense. You know, you look at the Bills last week, they gave over 100 yards rushing to Bilal Powell. I think you'll see Bernard Pierce get closer to the 100-yard mark and have a chance to score again. Clearly, they're going to rely on him if Ray Rice is out. That's the one thing you're going to have to keep an eye on. If Ray Rice plays, if he doesn't play, that will totally change the outlook for Bernard Pierce. I still think he may score even if Ray Rice is in there because Baltimore could build a lead and they can use Bernard Pierce to rest Ray Rice in that hip injury. But you're talking about a guy that's going to get every touch. They don't really have a lot of depth in that backfield, and clearly Bernard Pierce showed that he can get the job done.
All right, same game. C.J. Spiller, Dave. Fantasy owners are going crazy. What do they do this week?
He's been disappointing 2 of the last 3 weeks. He's only played 3 weeks. I think he's going to be disappointing again. You look at the Ravens and how good they've been. Ray Lewis, who they still haven't allowed a touchdown to a running back this season. They haven't allowed 100 total yards to a running back yet this season. And so for a running back like C.J. Spiller, who's splitting carries as it is, I don't think there's a lot of upside for him. I'm starting him over a lot of I'm not starting him. I'm starting a lot of other running backs ahead of him that I'm surprised to be seeing. Guys like Giovanni Bernard, Maurice Jones-Drew. I think there's an argument for Bilal Powell to be better than C.J. Spiller. So I think you got to kind of consider your options with him.
We are getting a lot of mileage out of this Buffalo-Baltimore game as we go to the wide receivers here.
I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, not me. Torrey Smith is a start this week at Buffalo.
Yeah, we've been waiting for Torrey Smith to break out. And I think this is going to be the week, especially after the Jets receivers both broke out against Buffalo last week. 5 wideouts have had at least 10 fantasy points so far this season against the Buffalo Bills. When Torrey Smith lines up to Joe Flacco's right, he should be standing face-to-face with a quarterback named Justin Rogers. This is not a good cornerback. This is the guy that the Jets were picking on, and I think the Ravens are going to do the same thing. Look for Torrey Smith to score his first touchdown of the season.
All right, let's look at that Kansas City and New York Giants game. And Dwayne Bowe, #1 receivers, have struggled against the Giants. They're getting fresh princed. And Dwayne Bowe is a sit this week.
That's right. We do a show every Sunday morning on Fantasy Football Today. It's 11 a.m. Eastern, CBSSports.com. We do it with Chad Johnson. Chad Johnson, former NFL receiver. Chad Johnson has as many fantasy points in the standard league as Dwayne Bowe did last week. 1 catch for 4 yards. He's just not the focal point of this passing attack because Alex Smith spreads the ball around. He does not take shots down the field. And you're going to see, as Adam mentioned, a tough matchup against Prince Amukamara. You saw Dez Bryant week 1 struggle. We saw last week Steve Smith struggled. They do a good job of taking away #1 receivers. Demaryius Thomas in week 2 struggled. So you're going to see Dwayne Bowe, if in fact he is the quote-unquote #1 receiver there. Donnie Avery's outproduced him now to start the season. I just think you can get away from Dwayne Bowe right now. I think I'm overly optimistic in giving him 8 fantasy points based on what we've seen.
That's strong. 8 points.
All right, tight ends. 1 to start, 1 to sit. Do you like Big Heath in London against Minnesota?
I do. I think you're looking at a situation where this defense that he's facing has been brutal against tight ends. It's been great for the guys you've been starting against them, but they can't defend tight ends at all. In week 1, they gave up 1 touchdown. Week 2, they gave up 2 touchdowns. Week 3, Jordan Cameron scored 3 touchdowns. Could Heath Miller get 4? I don't think we're going to go that crazy, but I think Heath Miller has an opportunity in this matchup to do well, to come off the second game now after the ACL injury. He did okay last week, but this week he has a chance to score based on what we've seen from this Vikings defense. And you look at this passing game for the Steelers, things changed dramatically when Heath Miller was on the field last week against Chicago, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come.
All right, Dave, I'm out of material, so let's just talk about Owen Daniels. He's a sit against Seattle.
Yeah, an amazing week 1. He had a good week 2. He struggled in week 3. What did he not do in week 3? He didn't score a touchdown. And that's what's going to happen when he takes on the Seahawks, who have been very efficient against opposing tight ends. Only 6 tight ends have scored on the Seahawks in their last 21 games. That includes 2 playoff games last year where they did allow a touchdown to a tight end in both of them. Maybe that's just because of the heat of the moment in the playoffs. It doesn't really matter. Owen Daniels, if he doesn't score, he's not good for your fantasy team. I would sit him down.
Rankings, podcasts, projections, our live show, noon Eastern, Tuesday through Friday, and of course, 11 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday morning to help you set your lineup. We recap everything, 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's on fantasynews.cbssports.com. This has been a special presentation of Fantasy Football Today for CBS Local Sports. For Dave Richard and Jamie Eisberg, I'm Adam Azer. Good luck in Week 4.